Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Development Committee of the Sunshine Coast Regional District for Thursday, April 21st, 2022. It's 9:31. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the territory of the Seashelt and Squamish First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us today. There was one report that was published on Wednesday, so I guess it's sort of an amended agenda. Is there anything else that directors want to change or add or subtract before we adopt the agenda today? If not, I look for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And before we get going, can I have a motion to receive all the reports? Moved, seconded, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. All right, moving into Annex A, because we have no delegations today. Planning and Development Department Q1 report. GM Hall, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Chair. Staff are pleased to present a summary of the activities of the Planning and Development Department from the first quarter, and happy to address any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, comments, musings? Director Hiltz? Oh. Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. It's the planning application web page, which is page 3. Is that tied to the website update, or is it independent of the website update? Was my question. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. The planning application webpage is actually a separate project, so it will run in advance of the website update. It's using the Bang the Table platform. It's something that many local governments have started doing, so it's an initiative that the planning department's taken on to try and get our planning applications up online and out there for the public to see everything that's going on. Thank you.
So this is what's happening in our neighborhood? Is that there's the planning application website and there's what's happening. Is it the same thing?
It's the same. That's the same thing. Yes,
right.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. Backing up a page to page 2, it talks about the regional growth strategy, and it indicates in the last bullet that we potentially have a report coming Q2 or Q3. Looking forward to seeing that. I know the community is also looking forward to finding out where we're at and what the process is. Thank you.
Director Tice?
Right, which microphone? There we go. Yeah, page 2. One of my constituents pointed out that the first reading report for Bylaw 722 is scheduled for April 21st, 2022, and it's not on the agenda. So just wondering where we're at on that. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. That was our intention about 10 days ago when this report was finalized, but final formatting and technical edits are well underway. We've had a slight delay from what was planned a couple weeks ago due to reactive demands on a few files and staff illnesses, but we remain on track for our overall timeline as we described when we had an introductory report in December. And at this time, staff are prepared to have the bylaw on the May 12th board agenda for first reading based on that introduction in December. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Right. Too many devices to choose from. I was fascinated with the electric mowers and parks equipment demonstration day. I wish there had been pictures of that, and I'm a fan. I particularly hate leaf blowers, just for the record. So, yeah, that was very interesting, and I enjoyed reading this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Director Hiltz?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm on page 6. The strong construction activity, and my question is kind of it's about when applicants come in and apply, and there's renovations going on, and do people typically ask for old building permit files on their properties to looking to the regional district as kind of a host for a repository of plans for buildings. Is on the website it says anything over 2 years is an old record and is an archive. So just wondering if that's occurring, or is nobody wants to know about the past, I guess is kind of my question. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I can't speak to the frequency with which it occurs, but we do get records requests and we aim to assist where we can. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from Annex A? Last call. Director Lee.
Finding the right button here. I was very surprised to read that there's 30, well, which page was I on here? Anyways, that there's 37 bylaw infractions relating to the riparian areas. Are we making any headway in chipping that down, or do we expect them to kind of be all wrapped up at once we get going on them? In other words, 37's a lot. How the heck are we planning on addressing that many?
Thank you for the question. There's a few different parts to an answer to that. One is following board direction, staff are preparing bylaw amendments that will support enforcement on land alteration without a development permit, and those will be coming to a meeting soon, possibly before the end of the month. And as well, staff are following board direction to prepare amendments to our bylaw enforcement policy, enabling more timely action on, and more, I guess, therefore more efficient action on these files. The human side of it from a staff perspective is that these are complex files. They take a lot of time. They often involve multiple agencies. And we do our best with the resources we have to prioritize them and be efficient about how they're pursued following our current board policy. But I unfortunately can't tell you with confidence that they'll all be wrapped up soon or at once. We treat each case based on the specifics of the issue and according to policy. Thanks.
Thank you, GM Hall. Excuse me. I've got other speakers. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On, well, pages, what have we got? 9, 10, and part of 11, there's information about the fire departments. It's nice to see the stats, and it really lays out for us and for the community the call-outs that they deal with. One of the things that came up on a meeting, I don't remember which one recently that I had, was around the impact on fire departments with regards to mental health and substance use. And I'm going to pursue with the fire departments around, particularly with Seashell, because I have access to their information. Since the emergency health service actually increased funding, and we have additional ambulance people and ambulances being deployed on the Sunshine Coast, I want to know what the impact of that is on the fire departments, because I know when we talked with the ministers at UBCM, it was a huge concern for volunteer burnout with the fire departments. So I'd like to see what, if there's been an impact, so I'll be pursuing that. And then Sunshine Coast Emergency Program, you indicate there are 2 Fire Smart coordinators hired, and members of the public are able to request the Fire Smart home assessment. How are we getting that information out to the community? What's the plan for communication or engagement with the community so that they actually know about this and will reach out? I know one of the things we hear about a lot from the community is, what happens if there's a forest fire on the Sunshine Coast? Well, this is preparing to help our community. So how do we ensure that they know about it? Thanks.
Good question. GM Hull, did you want to take it, or I do see that Manager Trite is here as well?
I think Manager Trite would be well placed to answer that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. An advertising. It's a bit of an echo there.
Yeah, there usually is with the first person who's online. Just, we don't hear it, so if you're able to speak through it, it'll straighten itself out in a couple seconds.
Okay, I won't take it personally. So we've been advertising through the paper and on radio as well. We also have it on our website. We've had about, say the last I checked, probably about 55 requests, I believe, for fire smart assessments. And we've probably got about say 12 to 15 of those completed right now, and the rest are in the queue. So as they come in, we have someone assigned to collect the requests, sort of arrange them in geographically, and then assign them to one of the two coordinators so they can go out into one specific area and sort of do them in a more efficient manner. But as far as the advertising, it's been in the paper and on the radio. Our communication team here at the SCRD put together a plan, and the funding for that communication plan was also covered by the same grant that covers the wages of the coordinators.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Manager Trite. Director McMahon?
Yes, following up on the emergency planning, Jordan Pratt was the guest speaker last night at the Elphinstone Community Association. He did a great job. The information he presented was thoroughly appropriate to the audience, and his enthusiasm for the subject came through really well. The Community Association was very pleased. The actual question I had, however, was back to the riparian bylaw violations, and I'm just wondering how that compares historically to, say, 3 years ago.
GM Hull?
Yeah, staff, we're left to rely on anecdotal consensus here, but it's worth saying too, there's often multiple bylaw infractions associated on any given file, so classification becomes an issue. But certainly we're seeing more activity lately. In the time that I have worked here, we have not had this level of files, and I don't want to say it, but we're over 40 now since this report was written, so it doesn't appear to be letting up. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kroll?
Thank you, Chair. To Director Seeger's comment about the fire smarting, I said, because when I attended a safety meeting last week briefly, and the program came up, and I sort of followed up, I found it a little bit confusing to who qualifies, how do you apply. So I contacted the Director of Communication, and he just spoke to me this morning, and it's going to be sort of moved up a little higher, given a little higher profile, and actually who qualifies for it, because people in Gibson's thought, well, how come we don't qualify? Well, they do. It's just not blatantly apparent. So that's going to be corrected. And with respect to the fire department and the burnout factor, we had the report from Chief Michaels in Gibson's on Tuesday, and he in fact mentioned that they had lost several members of the Gibson's detachment, and it was just sort of, in quotation marks, COVID related. And he didn't get into the specifics of it, but there was sort of a sense in the room that it was sort of, people just burned out by the need. So, but hopefully the Director of Communications is on top of it, and the fire smarting, how to get to it in a simple manner, because I sort of searched around and I had a bit of a challenging time finding it, and then do I qualify? It was a big question. And there's a sort of amusing little bit in it all. On the template form for registering to get it, it asks you what country you're in. It's one of those, typical templates. It's available for, online application, but I thought it sort of amusing.
Yes, sometimes we feel like we're in a different country up in Seashelt. So, Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. It's on the last page of where the table is, and it lists District of Seashelt under bylaws and dog control. Is that I don't think that's the right one, but is it SIGD or District of Seashelt for bylaws and dog control in that table?
Good question. GM Hall?
Perhaps Manager Trite can speak to that, or we do have our animal control and bylaw enforcement officer in the gallery here as well.
So the question is why there's one dog control incident in the District of Seashelt? Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, if that is indeed the District of Seashelt, or if that's supposed to be SIGD.
I'll defer to Ms. Kirkpatrick. I believe it's District of Seashelt, but if she's available, she'd be the one probably could answer it more accurately.
All right, thank you. Just taking a second here to make some space.
Yes, you're correct, Chair. That would be SIGD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Director Pratt.
Well, it wasn't my dog, so just a comment from I guess, the country of Half Moon Bay. Is seeing if we're going to select countries. I'm really happy to see the Fire Smart program and being able to help communicate that, but just wanted to go back to just the commentary around the riparian area and the bylaw issues around all of that. And I think part of the reason why we are seeing that is not just the environmental changes of what we've seen the last year, well, especially 2021 was a little bit, but as everybody gets more aware about climate change and how their movement, or when they're prepping their ground and everything, how that affects everyone around them. I think we're going to see more and more of that, as well as, also communicating to the community that, hey, we're not a police agency. If you want us, to do something, you actually have to report it, because we don't know. And it came up recently in the Half Moon Bay town, one of the recent Half Moon Bay town halls about, or communication events that, somebody asked, well, if I build a home without a permit or anything, like, how would you guys know? And it's like, well, we wouldn't, unless it's reported to us. It that's the nature of bylaw infractions, is we don't have that capacity. We're not actively looking for those. We have our staff has more than enough to deal with on a regular basis without actually going out. So as people become more aware of what's going on around them, and as our rural areas densify further, I think we'll just see a continual rise in this. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, and I don't see anybody scrambling for their hands up button, so I think we will move on to Annex B. Thank you to staff for the information and the statistics. Always good to see what's going on. Moving on to Annex B, BC Timber Sales Operating Plan 2022 to 2026. And I think we're turning this over to Ms. Clark.
Good morning, directors. Staff have prepared an information report for you based on there being no new cut blocks proposed for the Lower Sunshine Coast in this year's BC Timber Sales Operating Plan. And we're here to take your questions if you have them.
All right, thank you. Nice short report. It is for information only. Directors, any questions? I don't see any hands up, so no. All right, thank you. And moving on to Annex C, West House Sound Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 640.5 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 310.194, 2061 Twin Creeks Road, consideration of third reading and adoption. Turn this over to Mr. Sayao. Mr. Jackson.
Actually, yes, thank you. Senior Planner Xiao is away this week, so I'll be taking on the rest of his items on the agenda. He did leave me some good notes, though. The report provides a summary of the public hearing held on March 29th, 2022. The public hearing revealed that some consider the proposed development helpful in creating a form of housing that offers opportunities within the spectrum of affordability, and for creating auxiliary commercial service and amenities for residents in the surrounding area. However, there were also concerns noted related to the proposed mobile home park with respect to road access, water supply, and sewage disposal, residents' access to recreation and amenities, as well as potential use for short-term rental. This report provides an analysis on how these concerns can be addressed. Staff conclude that the proposed development is suitable for the location and that it would increase the availability and diversity of housing options on the coast, while also providing tourist, commercial, and recreational opportunities. It is additionally noted that the proposed RM3 zoning would not permit short-term rentals. Of particular importance to the development is fire protection, as the site is outside the SCRD fire protection areas. To secure the implementation of fire protection measures and operational programs, staff are recommending a covenant that would stipulate the specific requirements to achieve adequate fire protection measures for the property. Staff recommend that the bylaws receive third reading, and prior to the adoption of the bylaws, a covenant to implement fire protection measures and fire smart programs for the proposed development be registered to the title of the property. Thank you. Staff are here to take any questions.
All right, thank you for that introduction. Directors, any questions? Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, staff, for the report. Yeah, it summarizes everything very well, and I'm going to say thanks to Director Toth for chairing the public hearing. Thank you very much for that. It was well done. I just have one question on the covenant of the fire smarting, and it almost seems like that this is kind of, I'm going to say, a one-off development permit for a wildfire protection area. It's because we don't have DPs for wildfire, so this is sort of a halfway step towards that in some ways. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. That's a correct summary. We don't have a development permit area for fire protection at this time. So this would essentially do the same through a covenant that would be registered to the title of the property that would obligate the property owner. In the same way that a development permit is registered as a notice of permit on title, this would be registered with a longer covenant on title that would actually stipulate all of the regulations that they had to follow. So that would give us the authority to ensure that they were followed following the rezoning being approved once it's registered. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about, general question about fire protection. Would it be possible for them to do what I would call a contract with the Gibsons Fire Department, with the understanding that they would respond in the case of a request by the owner? And my concept would be they pay the fees as everybody else, but they're not getting no insurance break, of course, but at least they could get fire protection. Is there such a thing? I mean, heck, we go up and fight wildfires in the interior. Why wouldn't we contract something like that?
Thanks for the question. Don't have a direct answer for it. It's certainly something that staff could look into if the committee so wishes. We do have Manager Trait as well in the audience here, so perhaps he may have some additional information on that question and be able to provide some more specifics. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Manager Trait?
Thank you, Chair. Such contracts do exist in the province, probably more typically for industry, but it could also be for a residential area. It's nothing that we have ever had in the SCRD. It's something that we could possibly look at if we weren't going to pursue expanding the fire protection areas to include an area such as that. We could potentially look at having a contract with that one area, but probably generally, if we're going to expand, we might be looking at expanding a fire protection area in whole rather than sort of carving out individual sections that we'd offer protection to.
Thank you. Follow up, or are you good, Director Lee?
And the reason I was curious is because it would help pay for it, of course, because if they were that interested in having that level of fire protection, they could join and pay, and everybody'd be happier. Anyways, thanks.
Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm wondering if it's, let me paint the picture here. My concern with mobile home parks, and I'm fully in support of them and everything, but one of the things that we've been seeing on the coast is a lot of our mobile home parks have gone to 55 plus range and that kind of thing. Is there any, do we have any jurisdiction to request or put on a covenant on title or anything like that, that an age restriction not be enforced in that way on the park rules? I have a feeling the answer is no, it's not within our jurisdiction, but this is one thing that really really concerns me, because a lot of our lower cost housing on the coast is it's not available for families, young people. They're most of the mobile home parks on the coast are 55 plus, and it's a whole section of our community that we've lost, and we've seen this over a number of years.
Thank you for the question. Zoning certainly isn't something that typically covers that sort of spectrum of use of a parcel of land. Covenants certainly can. Oftentimes we'll see that some of those 55 plus developments will actually have a covenant registered to title that will regulate the age requirement, so it's sort of there in perpetuity. To this time, we have not pursued something like that would sort of essentially do the reverse. Technically, I don't see a reason why it couldn't be achieved through a covenant, but it's not something that we've set a precedent on doing yet. Nor, to my knowledge, have we heard from this owner that is their intent at this time.
In fact, they actually commented here that there won't be an age restriction on the mobile park.
Perfect. So there we have it from the applicant, then, that's not their intent. So, I mean, we can certainly go with that. Certainly there are mechanisms, as I mentioned, that, we could pursue with a covenant, but it's not something that we've set that precedent at this time. And in this case, it doesn't sound like there's possibly a need. So, but happy to hear further questions and direction. Thank you.
And just a thank you to the applicant for putting in that message. Thank you, Lucas, for putting that in. But it is something I think we do need to see as a community, because there are, I think of the mobile home development on Harry Road, that it went from being all ages and then it went to 55 plus, and we've seen that through a lot of other developments, and it's and I understand that, but it takes a huge section of lower cost housing out of the market completely for families and young people that are still within the workforce. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, good issue to raise. I'd actually be interested in seeing what kind of covenants might be available for that, for anti-age restriction or whatever you call it. Because we have another mobile home development coming in my area. And yes, this is being raised repeatedly as an issue. So, and the current owner obviously does not intend to pursue an age restriction, but, that owner could sell to somebody else who could implement an age restriction, which is what has happened in all the mobile home parks pretty much on the coast. They didn't used to be restricted, most of them. So that interests me. In general, with covenants, the covenant in this case, a lot of the work in setting up a fire protection system would be done at the time that the park is developed. So we know that happens. But how do we monitor covenants to see if the terms of the covenant is adhered to 10 years or 20 years down the line?
Thank you for the question. Covenants are much like dealing with bylaw enforcement, where it's sort of not something that we're out there actively necessarily policing, but certainly our fire chiefs, when they do their inspections, can note whether things are being followed. but it's not to say that, we're out there every day looking to see if fire extinguishers are in place. But it's something that if we saw that there was a problem, because that covenant is registered to title, that we certainly could, seek counsel and see what options we would have to ensure that it's enforced. That's the intent of having them on title. But the hope is that having it there normally, it makes property owners aware when they purchase the property, or if in this case they are already the owner of the property. And typically we don't see a lot of problems with these sorts of covenants that are sort of having some specifics for the development. But when we do, oftentimes, we can take that same sort of approach as we would with bylaws and sort of start by reaching out and typically look towards a friendly way towards compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. That raised a point in my head that I was thinking of where, you'd have annual inspections for the commercial operations for because of the fire code issues. And I thought, well, there's no business licensing in the regional district. So you would in the district of Sechelt have an annual inspection on all of these properties for fire safety and life safety, but not necessarily out in the rural areas. Director Pratt?
I don't want to take too much more time on the age thing, because I think that's a great conversation to have offline, but with an owner of a mobile home park, yes, as long as they own the mobile home park, they can keep it as whatever. They can keep the rules, they'll stick to their plan and what have you. But if you have something else like a strata development, once the developer gets past a certain part of sales, if the strata council decides to choose to go to an age restriction, they can do that within the Strata Act. So, I think this is the age thing is a larger conversation that I would really like to have, because it's a huge issue on the coast. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Seegers?
Thank you. I kind of see a motion that should happen here with regards to requesting staff look into how we can protect mobile home parks in particular from being age restricted. Go for it.
All right. Okay, well, it's bigger, but we could, I think it's bigger than mobile home parks, but look at age restrictions. And I have a feeling it's going to end up as a UBCM motion, probably. So, because that's what it's looking like to me. But I would suggest that we ask staff to bring back a report on the implications of instituting age restrictions in the regional district for occupancies on properties. Is that, or anti-age restrictions? Is that significantly vague and clear at the same time? Less, yeah. I think Director Seeger's wording was probably a little bit better than mine. I just don't want to see the mobile home parks. I'm thinking the processes through covenant, et cetera.
It's probably something like we'd like staff to investigate methods of ensuring that properties are not age restricted and reporting back.
Equal access regardless of age. Inclusivity. A buzzword here or there.
What would you like it to say?
I think you guys get what we're after.
Yes.
So, what would you like us to move to?
If I can say, with an idea that this might be something that the board needs to advocate on with the province.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I suspect the committee knows better than staff what the committee would like. However, if it's helpful, and considering the priorities set out in the strategic plan and the current planning and development work plan, may I ask a question of the committee about whether it's research that the committee would like or action? And if it is action, then perhaps a motion that staff seek to pursue age inclusiveness in processing development applications going forward, that gives staff policy direction to seek to incorporate that where we can using the tool that might apply at the moment, would move us towards that goal and integrate the work into our operational work, rather than creating a research project.
I see some
Thank you.
hands up, but I'm going to go first. I would suggest that perhaps this is not the time nor the place to try and craft something on the fly. I think the advocacy piece might be the way to approach it for us to take on that workload, but I will go to my speakers list. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think at this point, we're looking at research. We don't know if we can even do it. Right? So if you come back and say, yes, we can do it, great. If you say, no, we can't do it, then we know we have a role to play in taking that up with UBCM and the province. So probably not, we're not looking for a ton of work on your side. Just can you do it or can't you do it, and given the legislation that you have.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm just curious if other regional districts have walked down this road before us, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. If this has been an issue in other areas. So a shallow dive into this was, I think, what we had in mind.
And Director Pratt.
In the spirit of the shallow drive, what I would like, especially after, based on the comments from the GM of Planning and where we are in our term, I would maybe suggest that this is best a research taken offside with maybe the directors, and then go for, and if we see that there's enough meat there, then we bring it back to ask staff to delve in further. Because I'm curious as to what the other, we do have enough connections amongst the other RDs to just do a shallow dive on our own before we commit too much staff time and energy to this, because we might not even legally be able to do this, and it might just go right to advocacy to UBCM this fall. So I don't know if we need a motion for that, if we're just going to do it ourselves, but I'd be happy to sit down with a couple of directors and look at it.
So it sounds like Director Pratt's taking that on. There was a kind of motion put forward but not seconded, so there's nothing really on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll take that kind of not motion and run with it and not direct staff at this time.
Great. Thank you, Director Pratt, for volunteering. And thank you, staff, for that gentle deflection. We will we'll see what we can do and come back to you later. I do see hands up. Director McMahon?
Yes, I'd like to move a motion. I'd like to move the recommendations on page 15.
And I have a seconder for that. This is rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. Director Seegers, I see your hand up.
Yes. The conversation around the fire protection measures and fire smart programs and the follow-up. Given they're out of the fire service area, will they even get an inspection? Because that's something that's provided in fire service areas. I'm wondering if it would be possible to have the fire protection measures and fire smart programs be part of the park rules, so that when somebody signs up, they move into the mobile home park, it's in their park rules. It's actually presented to them, and they're signing that they will take part in that. And I don't know, again, if that's something that we as a regional district could put on that.
Good question. I don't know if staff even could hazard a stab at that question on whether we have any ability to influence park rules. I mean, we know the applicant is here and listening, but...
Thank you for the question. Certainly a good one. Staff don't have an answer at this time as to whether or not we could actually legally do that. I know that we can register Fire Smart covenants on title that sort of say that what they need to, sort of the list of what needs to be done in terms of, ensuring it's a smart development. Whether that could get into ensuring that it's in their park rules, it'd have to do a little bit more research. Certainly happy to also work with the applicant. I'm not sure, I know they're here, if they have any thoughts on whether they'd like to include that in their park rules voluntarily, perhaps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon?
I'm just going to hazard a guess that that wouldn't be practical, because typically the mobile home owner owns only the home. They are not responsible for the property. The property owner, the mobile home park owner, is responsible for the property. So I don't think it would be necessary to put it into the park rules. Just my thought.
I do see that the applicant, oh, they had their hand up. I was going to give them an opportunity to speak if they wanted to speak to this particular issue. So go ahead, Lucas. Just, yeah.
Hello, yeah, that is something we're definitely willing to work with on staff, is having rules enforced for each of the mobile home park patrons to make sure that their sites are maintained to fire smart standards, including brush removal and spacing around each mobile home unit, etc. So that is definitely something we are willing to talk with staff about.
Great. Thank you. All right. I don't see any other hands up. So I will call the question on the recommendations on the floor, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. How do you guys feel about a 5-minute break? Yeah, I see a couple nods. Okay, we'll take a 6-minute recess. We'll see everybody back at 10:18. And welcome back to the Planning and Development Committee of April 21st, 2022. Next up in our agenda is Annex D, renewal of Pender Harbor Golf Club lease agreement. And I think we're turning this over to Manager Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Senior Planner Sao also left me some great notes on this one. The report brings forward the request for the Pender Harbor Golf Course Club to renew the lease for the use of the golf course land. The 5-year lease expired on March 14th, 2022, this year. The golf club is requesting renewal of the lease as it is for another 5-year term from 2022 to 2027 to allow the continual operation of the club. No changes to any provisions of the lease are proposed at this time. However, the golf club has expressed a desire to work with the SCRD on an amended lease agreement for a 25-year term, along with other provisions that would allow the golf club more flexibility in operations and long-term planning needs. Proposed amendments to the lease would be brought forward to the board for consideration on a future date or as part of the next renewal. Staff recommend renewal of the current lease for a 5-year term. Thank you. Staff are here to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Director Seegers.
Thank you. In my other life, I tend to deal with financing, and one of the rules around financing with lenders is you can finance for 5 years less than the length of a lease. So if they've got a 5-year lease, they can't actually get any mortgage or anything on it. 25 years would allow them to get financing if they wanted to do any kind of upgrading. So.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I can see that a longer lease would make sense. My question is this a green golf course? Do they have policies around things like herbicides and pesticides? And is there any opportunity for carbon capture associated with this property?
GM Hall.
Thank you. Staff don't have that information. It's beyond the scope of the lease renewal. I can say, though, that there are pretty standard environmental protection parameters outlined in the lease. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon, follow-up or okay? Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I was surprised to find that it was actually SCRD land, because when you look at the website for the golf course, it says it doesn't mention SCRD at all. So I guess my question is, if it is, I guess it's fee simple ownership of the SCRD, and some kind of acknowledgement through the golf course to acknowledge that the land is SCRD land. It does seem it doesn't get recognized in the website. So is there any way to draw attention to this in some way? Thanks.
Just before I go to staff, I'm gonna why? Director Hiltz, just as a
I think accountability and transparency, that, you know, this organization is benefiting from land that was received through the SCRD, and it doesn't, I think it's an accountability and transparency aspect of it. That's what I'm interested in, yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's another circumstance like this. Sarah Ray Hall is, you know, those are acknowledged, SD 46. So it's the acknowledgement that this is a, you know, back in the day, the provincial government deemed to give this grant to the regional district for this intent. So it would be, I was just kind of surprised that this actually was there. So there's accountability and transparency. Thanks.
Okay. GM Hall, did you want
to? Well, staff can mention it to the to the lessee. I suspect that the opportunity to negotiate that in would be at the next renewal or reconsideration of the terms of the lease, if there's a desire to have it formally included. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Hiltz, did you want to follow up on that? Or?
If a motion would be required to, in the next lease agreement, to discuss with the leaseholder that acknowledgement as part of the lease agreement in the next, yeah, I would be happy to make that as a recommendation if that's what staff needs to look at it in the future. Is it's sort of the sponsorship thing, kind of, and yeah, so that would be, is that a reasonable thing to do, to request that through staff, I guess, as a motion?
Let's just put a pin in that for a sec.
Sure. Okay.
We'll finish off the speakers list and we'll come back to that.
Perfect, thank you.
Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what kind of lease payments this golf club pays, but I do wonder, especially when you're looking at something as long as a 25-year term, whether that renewal would be linked to inflation rates and such things, and whether there will be some sort of market-based rate comparison done when the renewal happens. So just wondering if there's any kind of insight into how the rate structure for the lease is, how staff comes up with the rate structure, essentially. That's my question.
Thank you. GM Hall?
Thank you for the question. To my knowledge, the rate structure that's in the lease hasn't changed since it was developed in the 90s. I think that the intent, as described in the report here, is just to carry on with business at this time, and it seems to me that both parties are interested in reviewing the arrangement to ensure that it's maximizing the effectiveness of the lease and benefiting the community to the highest degree possible, and the financial portion of the lease would be part of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Seegers?
Thank you. In my term at the District Seashell, we've had cause to deal with the Seashell Golf Course, Blue Ocean Golf Course at this point. One of the things that we found out was that golf courses don't actually typically make money. So if we're looking for additional funds to come through, it's probably not the place to go to, but could be looked at in a 25-year lease agreement. Thanks.
Director Pratt?
It's interesting. This, I've been on the coast since '94, and actually this is, I don't know how I missed it, but I had no idea that the STRD actually owned the land and that the golf course was a lessee. I think it's a great arrangement. I mean, when my kids were going to preschool up there, we used to organize golf tournaments. It's a very family, like it's a community golf course. It's not a moneymaker. But it's a great piece of recreation that we're assisting the Pender Harbor and Area A community with. And I know that from my close connections in Area A that they often feel left out with recreation. But so I would love to see some additional SCRD signage, or just that so it is a little bit more recognized that we are helping to provide this as a support to the community as well. But with the rates and stuff like that, I mean, I'm not. They're not big money makers, and I know they struggle, and they have a huge volunteer component that helps make this community course work. So, thanks.
Just in between speakers here, I pulled up their website, and the Pender Harbor Golf Club Society runs it. So it is a nonprofit organization running it. So I'm wondering if something like the signage component can just be taken offline and discussed with the organization. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you did. You just mentioned what I was going to mention, and that fact is it's heavily run by volunteers, and it's a not-for-profit society. And they're currently running a large fundraiser to try and collect enough money to fix it up after the winter. They're constantly struggling for funds. And so it's entirely a community golf course supported by the community. So I think staff's recommendations are actually bang on. And if there isn't signage, I can't see any reason why there wouldn't be. So I'm sure they'd be quite willing to do that. If it isn't already being done, I was going to look and see if it was. I'd be surprised if it's not, actually, but we need to do that if that's the case. I'll hold making my motion though until everybody gets a chance to speak.
Well, I don't see anybody else on the speakers list. Although I just will check with Director Hiltz. Did you want to put something forward formally, or do you want to see if the offline conversation is sufficient for the signage?
In terms of the recommendation, not related to, but there might be a separate one. I would like to have it be acknowledged in the lease somehow, because we do this when we do grant and aids. We say you need to recognize that the SCRD is a funder, and maybe it would actually help, the community see, this idea that the SCRD does more than just what they see, and so to clarify the role a little bit more. So I don't think it's with this motion, but I would like to propose something afterwards, yes.
Okay, thank you. In which case, Director Lee, I'll come back to you.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 26.
All right, and I see a seconder for that. This is voting A, B, D, E, and F, and I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be. It would be to do with the staff working together on the next agreement for the 25-year to just consider the SCRD as a supporter or something, acknowledgement of the SCRD's support. So whether staff need this as a recommendation was the question, or whether they can just incorporate it. So that was the really, do you need a motion, or do they want it for the record keeping that this is what we want them to do in the future? So.
I'll go to GM Hall, maybe, if he wants to.
Thank you, Chair. A motion is always helpful.
Yeah. So something that staff incorporate SCRD recognition, or request SCRD recognition be incorporated into the marketing of the...
Something like in the amended, the work on the amended lease agreement for the 25-year include acknowledgement of the SCRD's participation. Something like that would be.
Okay. I mean...
I think it's close enough.
Yep, sounds good. You're making that
I am making that motion, yes.
Okay, and I see a seconder. Any other comments or discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor? And opposed? I don't see any opposed, so that is carried. All right, thank you. Moving on to Annex E, TELUS telecommunication tower near Storm Bay, request for local government concurrence. And over to Manager Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents a request from TELUS for local land use concurrency for the telecommunication tower to be located within the Storm Bay area. The purpose of this new facility is to improve wireless communication services to residents, businesses, and tourists in the Storm Bay Narrows Inlet area. Improved communication capacity in the area is also a benefit to the Emergency 911 service, search and rescue, and other emergency response organizations. TELUS has conducted the required consultation with the public and received no comments. The Half Moon Bay Advisory Planning Commission has reviewed the tower proposal and recommends support. Staff consider the proposal appropriate for the location and consistent with SCRD policies and recommend providing concurrence in to the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada regarding this proposal. Thank you. Staff are here to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Directors, questions, comments, recommendations? Director Pratt?
I would move the recommendations on page 28 of the report, please.
Okay, and I see a seconder for that. Thank you. Any other comments before I call the question? Voting A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to Annex F, frontage waiver FRW 00015, 4289 Francis Peninsula Road. And turn this over to Planning Technician Rui Tong. or
Thank you.
Manager Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to take this one. Planning Technician Ritong is in the audience. She's actually away today, here for interest. This proposed application requests a frontage waiver for one of 3 proposed lots in a subdivision at 4289 Francis Peninsula Road. In order to accommodate the existing single-family dwellings and areas for sewage disposal fields on proposed Lot 1 and 3. The subdivision design proposes limited access to Lot 2 via panhandle driveway off Francis Peninsula Road. This configuration creates a proposed lot that is less than 10% of its total perimeter, resulting in the requested frontage waiver. The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure has issued a preliminary layout review indicating support for the configuration of the subdivision. Staff recommend approval of this frontage waiver, and we're here to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors. Director Lee.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 52.
Thank you, and I see that seconded. All right, I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex G, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Approval of Evacuation Route Planning Grant. Over to Manager Trite. Oh, GM Hall.
Sorry, Chair, we're keeping you on your toes. Just trying to have our spread the load. This report is the administrative machinery to move forward with this grant that the committee will recall from providing a resolution of support some months ago, and also consideration during the budget process. Although we didn't receive notice of approval until after budget was concluded, so hence the report here today. And as noted in the report, there is coordination with member municipalities on this, and staff from the regional SCEP service will be supporting work in those jurisdictions in coordination with those other local governments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nothing is as it seems today. Who provides the report and who's speaking to it? So catching me off guard here. Director Seegers.
All right, since this is one of only a couple of items on this agenda that I can actually vote on, I'm going to move the recommendations as on page 56.
And it's been seconded by the town of Gibsons. Thank you, directors. I don't see any hands up or any questions from directors. This is voting all, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Annex H, APC meeting minutes, March 22nd. Director Pratt.
Thank you. There was it was interesting to have a subdivision application come before Half Moon Bay APC. And there's been a lot of subdivision conversation in Half Moon Bay, if you hadn't heard. But one of the things that came up with this one is the APC has asked that the SCRD provide them with a copy of the raw report and the development permit reports. And do we need to motivate that here in order to that happen, or can staff just take care of that internally?
Manager Jackson.
Thanks for the question. If that's what the APCs are preferring, we certainly can take care of that internally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And this is, it's one example of a subdivision that's been, it's been in the works for a long time. So, and with some new APC members, they want to, understand what's going on and everything too. So, thank you.
All right. Moving on to item number 10 in our agenda. This was the report that was published on Wednesday. Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment number 641.13 for 1220 Lockyer Road. I don't know who I'm handing it over to, but let's see who at the staff table wants to speak to it.
Good morning. The board provided direction to proceed to consideration of second reading of amending the OCP at 1220 Lockyer Road. In staff's research and preparation for this step, we reviewed previous guidance, reached out for more from both internal and external colleagues, as well as our referral agencies and legal counsel. The findings of this research offer an alternative to the current approach that staff feel is important to present to the board before they formally consider second reading. In this application and its intended subsequent application, SCRD is being asked to temporarily legalize an existing unlawful use, and that is the use of a country residential zoned parcel for an RV park. In addition, and as mentioned in the first reading report, there are concerns about legalizing the residential use of RVs. Further, to facilitate the current RV park, a number of other contraventions to OCP, zoning, and other regulations appear to be made. In finding a solution to the challenges that have grown over time on this parcel, SCRD is being called to consider a compassionate approach for the tenants who are caught in this circumstance. At the same time, it is SCRD's responsibility to ensure compliance with bylaws and regulations that are in place to protect the integrity, health, and safety of our built and natural environment, as well as provide certainty and ensure trust within our community. There are multiple values at play here that SCRD must account for in the path forward on this parcel. With deep respect for the tenants of the property and for your authority as the board to make this decision, staff bring forward this alternate proposal which seeks to address multiple values. The alternate solution in this report proposes to rescind the resolution in support of second reading in favor of abandoning the bylaw amendment. The proposal advocates for a compassionate timeline for tenants of the property to relocate, suggesting 6 to 12 months, achieved through a compliance agreement with the property owner. Separately, SCRD, in collaboration with other corresponding authorities, would pursue property compliance, of course following board policy for the other contraventions. If this alternate solution is employed, the total amount of time of the unlawful RV use on the property will be 2 to 3 years, which is similar to the maximum amount of time permitted for a temporary use permit. As always, staff are here to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Directors. Who wants to go first? Director Ties.
Oh, I just clicked it just a little bit earlier than Mark. Anyway, yes, thank you, staff, so much for your continued perseverance in this file, and your there's a lot of research and information gathering that's gone into this, as well as some due diligence on all parts. So I really appreciate staff's work on this, and I am in favor of the motion, and I would like to encourage for a more on the 6-month side rather than the 12-month side. I think this has gone on long enough, and the neighborhood is concerned, and I think 6 months is more than adequate to move on that, considering that apparently there's now been some movement. Somebody left, 3 more have arrived. So
been raised, so I think it's a good solution all around. And 6 to 12 months it's not in the recommendation; it's in what I'll be leaving it with staff. So I'm good with the time frame, but it's not my area. And listening to the comments coming from the constituents, so I'm supportive of the recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you, Director McMahon.
For some reason, we've been in the habit of discussing the motions before we make them. So I'm just going to move the recommendations on page 63. And thank you to staff also.
Okay, I've got a seconder for that. GM Hall, I did see you raise your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify from Director Hiltz's comments. This is staff's recommendation, and the applicant is aware of it, but it was developed by staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon, your hand is still up. Did you? No? Okay. Director Pratt.
Thanks. I was, it's tough because for me, this is, it's a very human issue right now that we're dealing with. And it's not just dealing with the tenants that are being affected and the community around that's being affected, but the way it is affecting our staff as well. I'm not in support of the 6 months. I would like to see it go longer because of the tenants. And we are in a housing crisis. And the reality is there are a lot of people on our coast that are living in RVs as permanent residents. And it's just a fact. And it's not just happening within our coast. It's happening across BC, and it's unfortunate that there's a conception that it's a lesser than place to live. You know, some people are very happy to live in RVs, and for some people it's the only way they can get into the housing market or any kind of roof over their heads. And you know, I see the full gamut. In my other hat, Director Seegers does as well. You know, how many people get turned down for mortgages? How many people just don't apply because of the, they just can't make it work. Our housing situation on the coast is in a crisis situation. And I would rather see this go longer. I mean, frankly, yes, I know this has been a blatant disregard for our land use bylaws and for what the community plan is for this property. However, this comes down to these are people living in homes right now who are within the coast and are contributing to our community. They are our community members. It's become such a hot button issue. And if voting for this means that these people are going to get evicted in 6 months, I'm voting no. If voting for this means that they're going to get evicted in 12 months, I think I'd still say no. I would rather see it go longer because these are people that don't have any place else to go. We have other mobile home parks that are in the works, but it takes time. And as we know, RVs are not acceptable accommodation, but yet they are being used. And I can't justify evicting people from some place where they are living, whether it's an appropriate situation and whether or not the landlord is actually following our rules. I think the landlord should be following our rules and they need to be punished, however, and be held accountable for that. However, the people that are living there, because I would hate to be in bylaw and planning and look at these people and say, I'm sorry, you cannot be here, because where else are they going to go at this particular time? Yet when we have a land use that's just so far out of what it's supposed to be, we have to hold it accountable. We're in a terrible situation here, but we need to, at some point, have some feeling in government. So I know that's just a lot of pontification, but that's where I'm at right now. And at the end of the day, we are in a housing crisis on the coast, and nothing stops that. We have to decide how we're going to move forward. And in the rural areas, it's a lot more difficult than what we have in the municipalities. So, thanks.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, I appreciate Director Pratt's comment. At the same time, this is an inadequate septic field that's being used. There's health and safety concerns. There is a potential for liability on behalf of the SCRD for taking this on and permitting this use. So I think, the community around it is in an uproar. So I personally can't support this going on any longer than it has to. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director Ties. I don't see any other hands up. This is voting A, B, D, E, and F. We do have recommendations on the floor. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Would you like that recorded, Director Pratt?
Yes, and then I have a question for staff after.
Okay, so the motion or the recommendation was carried, and Director Pratt wants her vote opposed recorded, so go ahead.
I'm wondering if there, in recognition of the housing crisis, if we could, what the implications would be as a board if we were to institute a policy around bylaw enforcement for homes, having kind of an amnesty, I would say, in maybe just to the end of 2022, an amnesty around bylaw enforcement around for people in the housing situation, that it's more of a, rather than an eviction, it's a warning, and it's so rather than holding them to a full compliance, it's, look, this isn't appropriate. You will have to come into compliance, but we're not going to evict you at this time. And I know we have a fairly lenient board policy around, or it has fairly lenient around bylaw enforcement about, our 3 letters and our, allowing people to come into compliance. But going that one step further and offering an amnesty to anyone that may be evicted from due to bylaw enforcement, if that makes sense.
GM Hall.
Thank you. My initial comments are just, first of all, wanting to clarify that SCRD does not evict people. The decision that we have as an organization is whether or not and how and when to enforce our bylaws. And as Director Pratt says, the board's current policy on bylaw enforcement does provide a multi-step and stepwise approach to particularly voluntary compliance that gives folks time to bring a property into compliance. And on the question of whether further policy relating to the enforcement of a particular bylaw or an aspect of a bylaw could be developed, it's staff's understanding that yes, that is possible. And in fact, with the matter that's before us today, that is one part of the package of compliance actions here. And so if there's interest in expanding that beyond this property, that's something that staff could look at if directed. I will also say that, and I mentioned this earlier, when we were discussing land alteration enforcement matters as part of the quarterly report, that that staff are currently working on recommendations for updates to the board's enforcement policy that would, and one of the, if I recall the board's direction on that from a few months ago, more discretion in terms of the application of our enforcement tools was in scope of that work. Thanks.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Pratt?
Yes, and eviction was the wrong word, sorry, but asking that, I think that would help with the amnesty around the housing, and having a better structure of board policy may help alleviate some of the some of the work for staff too in the long run. So is what I'm thinking with having those stronger tools where they need the stronger tools around enforcement, and some more lenient in other areas would probably be very helpful. But I think that's...
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I know where Director Pratt's going with this, and I want to follow up on a comment that Director Tighes put forward. We as a board take on the liability of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. And one of the things that we always have to be aware of when we're looking at even relaxing bylaws or not enforcing them is health and safety. And if something was to happen and we hadn't enforced that, we could be really liable, and that would put us in a really difficult situation. So I think that needs to be front and center as well, and I think staff know that and would incorporate those kinds of things inside of anything they'd bring forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. And Director Seegers sort of beat me to the punch. In the town of Gibson's, because of this housing crisis, and I applaud the comments of Director Pratt, you know, this whole housing crisis is enough to just make you tear your hair out, because in spite of, you know, different programs, there are no shovels in the ground to solve the problem in a timely manner anyway. So in the town of Gibson's, we did ask Bylaw and Building to sort of work with the crisis situation, with the exception of where, you know, personal safety becomes an issue. And currently in Gibson's, we're chasing RVs around the streets because they're parking on streets, they're, you know, they move them as they are forced to move them, but it's an ongoing problem. So, you know, I've mentioned it before, perhaps there's a way collaboratively between the regional, certainly in the town of Gibson's, we don't have an abundance of land for RV parks. But I think there perhaps is an opportunity where collaboratively we might be able to work between the regional district and the municipalities to create some areas where RVs could be tied into municipal services, which would eliminate these needs for septic fields, which tend to be problematic, and end up, you know, coming up in reports to the board of they're out of compliance, it's going to cost this much to fix them. So I would like to be able to explore between the municipalities and the regional district the option of, even if it's on a temporary basis, of creating some areas where there's people, these people might find some refuge, because kicking them from one place to another is not a solution. And it just becomes emotional for staff to have to deal with, for people sitting on boards, for people sitting on councils, constantly dealing with this issue. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I don't know if we need a motion here, or that, you know, between the municipalities and the regional district, that we try and see if we can seek a collaborative solution to some temporary sites for RVs. Case in point, we have a hotel in Gibson's that if you try and book, you can't get it because the contractors have it booked for their workers because they can't find accommodation to build residences. So, you know, it's like we're like a crazed dog constantly chasing its tail, trying to solve a problem and not coming up with viable solutions. So I don't know whether we need a motion or a suggestion. I think on Monday we have an emergency housing meeting, you know, another place where this can be brought up. But, you know, until we see more shovels on the ground, we're constantly going to be faced with this problem. And booting people down the road is just not a solution.
Thank you, Director Kroll. And I've been thinking about this too, with this similar idea. Even if we can set up temporary areas that 5 years from now get turned into developments or whatever, In all of the looking around that I've been doing, the problem becomes anywhere where there's vacant land of enough to make any sort of an impact, there's no services, right? Especially with the sewer, and so do you go through the expense of installing a septic field for a 5-year term, or, do you do holding tanks, or, go ahead.
Well, that's why I was suggesting if we could have access to land that was, adjacent to a municipality where it would be fairly easy to extend a sewer line, to extend a water main, to provide service with, I know when I was managing or property managing the Poplars Trailer Park, when we got approval to put in an area to extend facilities, it happened fairly quickly. There's a couple of areas in Area E that were embraced by Gibsons to provide water and sewage to them. So, I think with some creative thinking, it could possibly be done.
And you mentioned that the next emergency housing meeting's on Monday. Okay. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'll be happy to have that discussion at the meeting on Monday. I was just going to go back to the question of an amnesty, and I appreciate Director Pratt speaking on behalf of the tenants and the unhoused. However, I don't, and I know that an amnesty has been floated before. The idea has been raised, but I think with the best of intentions that it might backfire and cause severe anxiety on the part of homeowners. Right now we have a lot of unconforming situations going on in the rural areas, and they're going on quietly without complaint because the neighbors are not having a problem and they're not complaining, and so people are managing. But I think people want to be able to complain if they feel that they need to. And, an amnesty might be just giving permission to a few unscrupulous property owners to break all the rules, and I don't think that's helpful. So while I appreciate the sentiment, I couldn't support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else from directors that takes us to the end of our agenda? If not, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from either our media, who's here today, or the gallery online? Probably best. Not everybody's here in the room, so.
This is more so a question for staff, but considering that part of the Lockyer alternative solution is based on finding a compliance agreement with the applicant, what happens if that agreement can't be reached?
GM Hall?
Thank you. On page 64 of the report, there's a comment that if we're unsuccessful in establishing a compliance agreement, or if such an agreement is contravened, then ticketing, which could be up to daily, would follow a period of negotiation in good faith, and that's aligned with the board's bylaw enforcement policy. Thanks.
And then I just have a follow-up question. How long is the negotiation period expected to take, and when do you expect to have another forthcoming report to the board?
Staff understand the community interest and in moving this forward, and we'll treat it as a priority, but don't have a timeline established at this time. Thanks.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any hands up from our attendees in the virtual gallery. So I think we are done. We'll see you all at the next one.